359.1. That is the violent crime rate the Federal Bureau of Investigation recorded for this entire country in 2024, measured per 100,000 people, and it is the lowest figure the Bureau has published since at least 1969. Hold on to that number, because everything you have been told about danger in Texas was built to make you look in the wrong direction. You have heard it is the border. Campaign advertisements say so. Cable panels say so. Somebody in the comments under this video is already typing it right now. Here is what the actual federal data says. El Paso sits at 278. McAllen sits at 150. Both of those cities are safer than the American average, and it is not a close call. The most violent places in Texas are nowhere near the river. They are inland, in refinery towns and oil towns and rail towns that built the wealth of this state and got handed the invoice afterward. Nobody prints a brochure about that. Realtors will not bring it up on a showing. The ranking websites bury it underneath a color-coded score they invented themselves and then sell back to you as research. In this video, we are counting down 10 Texas towns and cities so violent in 2026 that locals will tell you to your face not to stop for fuel. Coming up, a town whose name became one of the largest oil companies on Earth. A city whose name was the first word ever spoken from the surface of the moon. And the place where Texas oil was born, now carrying a violent crime rate more than 3 times the national figure. Think you know where Texas keeps its danger? Trust me, you do not. Hit subscribe. Not for the algorithm, for the route planning. Let's break it down. In April of 1994, a tornado took the historic Lancaster town square down to its foundations. The town rebuilt it. Not modernized, not swapped for a strip center, rebuilt brick for brick to look exactly as it had before the sky opened. About 40,400 people live here. In the most recent federal reporting year, the city logged 166 violent crimes, a rate of 410 per 100,000, roughly 14% above the national figure. The breakdown is what earns it a place on this list: 116 aggravated assaults, 28 robberies, 16 rapes, and 6 murders in a town you can drive across in 11 minutes. Run that against the population, and your odds of being a violent crime victim here in a given year land around 1 in 244. 15 miles from downtown Dallas, housing runs a fraction of what it costs inside the loop. And every relocation guide in the state has noticed. Here is what those guides leave out. The pitch is always Dallas access at not quite Dallas prices, and the commute estimate in those listings appears to have been measured at 4 in the morning on a holiday weekend by somebody with a personal relationship with every traffic light on Interstate 35. The photographs get shot on the square because the square is beautiful, then cropped before the frame reaches anything the photographer would rather you not consider. The industry word for a town at this stage is emerging. A term, meaning the numbers have not caught up yet, and everybody involved is hoping you sign before they do. Not one of those podcasts has opened the crime table, which is public, free, and takes 90 seconds to read. Locals will tell you the square is fine at midday, and the corridor running south of it is a different proposition once the lights come on. And nobody who lives here fuels up down there twice. Comment square if a relocation guide ever sold you a town it had clearly never visited. And stick around for number 9, because it is about to break something you have believed about Texas for a very long time. SpaceX built its Starbase facility at Boca Chica on the edge of Brownsville, which makes this city at the absolute bottom of the map, one of the few places on Earth where you can eat breakfast tacos and watch a rocket the height of a 30-story building head for orbit on the same morning. Brownsville carries a violent crime rate of 456 per 100,000. Up from 392 the year before. That is about 27% above the national number, and climbing at a moment when the country overall is trending down. Call it 1 in 219 odds in a given year, now the part that matters more than the ranking. Brownsville is the exception. El Paso came in at 278 per 100,000, more than 20% below the national figure. McAllen came in at 150, less than half the American average. Rio Grande City posted 189 with 0 murders. Del Rio and Eagle Pass also recorded 0 homicides that year. Across 11 border cities, the average violent crime rate landed slightly below the national number. There is an entire content economy built on a map of Texas with a red arrow pointing at the river. That arrow has been pointing there for a decade and has never once been asked to show its arithmetic. It aims at cities where multiple murder counts came back at 0. While the worst numbers in this state sit 400 miles inland beside a refinery where nobody films because the lighting is bad and there is no fence to stand in front of. The arrow does not go there. The arrow has a podcast, a book deal, and a speaking fee, and it has never once issued a correction. Brownsville belongs on this list. Its neighbors do not. Only one of those facts ever makes a thumbnail. Share this with somebody who repeats the borderline at every family gathering. They can take it up with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And coming up at number 8, a city whose population turns over so completely that its crime statistics are measuring a different set of people every few years. Fort Cavazos is one of the largest military installations on Earth by area, and the city outside its gates absorbs everything that comes with it. More residents here were born somewhere else than in almost any comparable Texas city. And on an ordinary afternoon, you will hear 4 languages in one grocery store parking lot. The most recent federal figures show 853 violent crimes, a rate of roughly 528 per 100,000, about 47% above the national average. Homicides came in at 20 for the year, up from 12. That puts your odds of being a violent crime victim near 1 in 189. There is real infrastructure, a regional airport, a growing medical corridor, and housing costs that look fictional to anybody arriving from a coastal market. Now the economics. Every gate to a major installation in this country grows the same ring of businesses in the same order. Rent-to-own furniture, title loans, a used car lot whose entire model is one signature from somebody with a guaranteed paycheck and a deployment date already on the calendar. Then a second lot, which exists to sell that same vehicle again after the first buyer transfers to Georgia. Then a payday lender positioned neatly between the two, presumably out of a sense of civic tidiness. None of that belongs to the people stationed there. It is a pattern legislated against in 9 states, and it rebuilds itself outside every gate in the country, because the customer base is contractually obligated to stay put. The transience is the real story inside these numbers. When a third of a community rotates out on a schedule, the informal things that hold a neighborhood together never fully form. The neighbor who notices, the block that recognizes a strange car. You cannot police your way out of that, and this city has been trying for 30 years. Ask anybody stationed here which stations they use after midnight, and you will get a specific answer, delivered fast, with no hesitation whatsoever. Comment GATE if you have lived in a military town and watched that cycle firsthand. Up next at number 7, a place of 34,000 people in the piney woods that somehow maintains a full zoo and carries a violent crime rate to match cities 10 times its size. There is an accredited zoo in deep East Texas in a town of about 34,000 people. The Ellen Trout Zoo has housed animals that cities 100 times its size cannot afford to keep. It began when somebody dropped off an alligator, and the town simply kept going from there. Lufkin recorded 181 violent crimes in the most recent reporting year, 529 per 100,000 residents. Call it 47% above the national figure, in a place ringed by pine forest and about as far from a major metropolitan area as East Texas allows. That works out to roughly 1 in 189 odds in a given year. The identical figure we just gave for a city built around a military installation 4 hours west. Those two places have nothing else in common. Angelina National Forest is minutes out. The lakes are enormous, the fishing is serious, and the whole region smells like resin after rain. Here is the arc, and you will hear it again before this video ends. This was a timber town, and timber towns were built by one company that owned the mill, the housing, the store, and frequently the newspaper. Then the mill mechanized. And mechanization is a polite word, meaning 1,100 jobs became 140 in a machine that never asks about dental coverage. The company kept the profits and moved its headquarters. The town kept the buildings. What remains is a municipality with the physical footprint of a far wealthier place and the tax base of a much smaller one, still maintaining roads paved for a population that has not lived there since the Reagan administration. The Chamber of Commerce banner still reads Timber Capital, which is accurate in roughly the way a stadium can still be named after a bank that failed. The warning locals give here is narrow and practical. Fuel up before you come off the highway, not at the stations on the loop and not after dark. Like this video if you have driven through an East Texas town and felt that exact contradiction. And coming up at number 6, a coastal city that produced one of the biggest recording artists in American history and has a crime rate its tourism board would much rather you heard as a rumor. Selena Quintanilla grew up here, recorded here, and is buried here. And people still leave flowers at the memorial on Shoreline Boulevard 30 years on. The city also permanently births the aircraft carrier Lexington, which served longer than any carrier in United States Navy history and now sits in the bay as a museum whose flight deck you can walk. Corpus Christi runs an index crime rate of roughly 4,005 per 100,000 residents, according to the Texas Department of Public Safety, with independent measurement putting total crime near 39 incidents per 1,000 people. Whichever measure you take, your odds here run meaningfully worse than the state average in a state already above the national one. Padre Island is right there, the seafood is excellent, the wind never stops. And the sunsets do things to that bay no photograph has captured. The tension is between two versions of one place that share a postal code and do not otherwise speak. There is the tourism version, a bayfront and a carrier and a marina. all photographed inside one 45-minute window of golden light. Then there is the working version, a port city with refineries on the ship channel, hospitality wages, and neighborhoods bringing the same 4 requests to City Council since the 1990s. The Visitors Bureau produces a map, and that map is accurate about everything printed on it. Nobody has ever been arrested for what a map leaves off, which is fortunate, because the entire American tourism industry would be in custody by Thursday. Picture this: late evening on the bayfront, wind off the water hard enough to lean into, the Lexington lit gray and enormous against a sky going orange behind it, halyards clinking on 100 masts. Somebody 2 blocks up playing Selena out of a car with the windows down, and every person within earshot knowing every word. And the practical advice residents actually hand visitors has nothing to do with the bayfront. It is about which stations off the ship channel you skip on your way out of town. Subscribe, because the tourism board version of a city is the only one most people ever get. Number 5 is a refinery town that gave American music one of its most recognizable voices and got very little back. Janis Joplin was born in Port Arthur and grew up here, and by every account, she could not wait to leave. There is a museum about her now, which is a very American sequence of events. Run somebody out, then build a display case. The city carries a violent crime rate of roughly 718 per 100,000, right around double the national figure. To the department's credit, the police chief has publicly noted that number came down about 11% year over year, and that is real progress worth saying out loud. Even so, the odds of being a violent crime victim in a given year here sit near 1 in 139. This is also one of the largest petroleum refining complexes in North America, processing a staggering share of the fuel that moves this country. Pleasure Island sits across the water and the fishing is outstanding. Here's the arrangement. The town refines fuel for the nation and hosts the towers, flares, tanks, and truck traffic that come with it. In exchange, it receives employment for some residents. Property tax revenue negotiated downward through abatement agreements approved by people who do not live within 20 miles of a flare stack, and an air quality profile that residents have been documenting to regulators for 3 decades. Corporate headquarters is elsewhere. It is always elsewhere. There is a specific kind of civic announcement printed on very good paper describing a community investment initiative, and the figure inside it is smaller than the legal budget for the negotiation that produced it. Meanwhile, the fire department runs equipment old enough to have its own retirement plan. Picture this: 2 in the morning on the ship channel. The refinery lit like a small city that never agreed to sleep. Every tower outlined in white and orange. The flare burning steady against low overcast. There is a hum you feel in your sternum before you hear it. Warm air, salt, and petroleum together. A tanker slides past so slowly and so silently that for a moment it does not read as a vessel at all. A town that refines fuel for the entire country, and residents will still tell you which pumps to avoid at shift change. Like this video if you think a place that refines the nation's fuel should get more out of the arrangement than a museum and a flare stack. And coming up at number 4, I show you exactly how the ranking websites get this wrong, using a town whose reputation they personally destroyed. Immediately northeast of Waco sits a town of fewer than 11,000 residents that has spent several years being called the most dangerous city in Texas by websites that have never sent anybody there. Now watch closely, because this entry should make you distrust every list like this one, including mine. One widely circulated ranking crowned Bellmead the most dangerous city in the state, using a violent crime rate of 1,294 per 100,000. That figure is from 2018. The city publishes its own numbers. And for 2023, that rate was 282 per 100,000, which is below the national average. A separate commercial data service currently implies something closer to 400. Same town, 3 sources, and a spread wide enough to drive a truck through. This is a working place with rail history, close enough to Waco to have caught the edge of the renovation boom that put Central Texas on television. So how does one small town end up with 3 reputations, small denominators? With fewer than 11,000 residents, a single violent weekend moves the per capita rate by hundreds of points. 14 incidents here produces a number that looks catastrophic beside a city of 2 million, where 14 incidents is a Tuesday. A ranking site takes that figure, does not adjust for volatility, does not note the reporting year, wraps it in a letter grade it invented, and publishes an article headlined "The Most Dangerous Place in Texas." That gets scraped by 3 more sites. Those get read by somebody making a video. And now, a town of 11,000 people loses a grocery chain and a housing development to arithmetic performed by a website in 2018 that has never issued a correction. Because there is no correction mechanism in a business where being wrong and being read pay identically. Bellmead is on this list to show you the machinery. That is the entire reason it is here. Comment fine print if you have watched a ranking website flatten a real place. And number 3 is a town whose name you have seen on a fuel pump your whole life without ever once knowing it was a town. In 1911, a company formed in this town and named itself after it, Humble Oil and Refining. That company grew, merged, absorbed, and rebranded across the following decades until it became what the world now knows as Exxon. The name on half the fuel pumps in America started as the name of a small settlement northeast of Houston, called after a man named Pleasant Humble who ran a ferry. Roughly 16,000 people live here. The violent crime rate is about 983 per 100,000, close to 3 times the national figure. The property crime rate is 10,320 per 100,000. A number so large it stops sounding like a statistic and starts sounding like a typographical error. On violent crime alone, the odds here run about 1 in 102. The town anchors a major retail corridor, sits minutes from Bush Intercontinental Airport, and holds on to a historic downtown that predates every strip center around it. And now the methodology lesson. Because Humble was ranked the single most dangerous city in Texas this year by the biggest ranking site in the category, and that ranking is doing something you need to see. The site ranks on total crime, folding property, and violent numbers into one score. This town contains one of the largest shopping complexes in the region, drawing shoppers from an enormous surrounding area. And every retail theft inside that complex gets recorded against a resident population of 16,000. The mall does not have residents. The mall has a parking lot the size of the town. So the denominator is a small community and the numerator is an entire region. And the result is a per capita crime rate that describes a shopping center rather than a place where people live. The violent crime problem here is real and serious. The number 1 ranking is an artifact of setting a regional mall on top of a small town and then dividing. Picture this, the old downtown just after closing. Brick storefronts from an era when this was an oil town instead of a retail corridor, warm light and 2 windows, freight rail somewhere north, working through a long, slow string of cars. Then you turn your head, and the retail corridor is glowing all the way to the horizon. Pylon signs stacked 80 feet up, and the whole thing sounds like one continuous highway. Share this with the friend who quotes ranking websites at you like scripture. And number 2 is a city so large that its crime statistics are really about 40 different cities wearing one name. On July 20th, 1969, a human being standing on the surface of the moon opened a radio transmission with a single word, and that word was Houston. Not a country, not a president, not a flag, a city in southeast Texas. It remains the first word ever spoken from the surface of another world. And it is up there because the flight controllers were sitting in a building off Interstate 45. Houston runs a violent crime rate of about 1,148 per 100,000 residents, more than 3 times the national figure, across a population of roughly 2.3 million. The murder rate sits near 13.8 per 100,000. On paper, that is 1 in 87 odds of being a violent crime victim in a given year. And I want you to hold that number loosely, because in about 90 seconds, I'm going to explain why it describes almost nobody. In absolute numbers, this is one of the largest concentrations of violent crime anywhere in the United States, in large part because it is one of the largest concentrations of people. It is also one of the most important cities in the country, the largest medical complex on Earth, the energy capital of the Western Hemisphere, a food scene that outclasses cities 3 times as famous, and the most demographically diverse major population in America. Here's the trouble with a single number for a place this size. Houston has no zoning. It has never had zoning. It grew outward across 660 square miles with almost nothing telling it where to stop. Which means a citywide crime rate averages neighborhoods that share nothing except a mailing address. There are pockets of this city, with the safety profile of a Scandinavian suburb sitting 9 minutes from pockets, carrying rates that would trigger a federal task force in a smaller city. Average those together, and you produce one figure that is accurate about the city while describing almost nobody who lives in it. That figure is what gets printed. That figure ends up in the thumbnail. And the person who signs a lease based on it has learned nothing whatsoever about the 4 blocks they are actually going to live on, which is the only geography that has ever mattered. There is no citywide answer to which gas station is safe in this place. There's only a 4-block answer, and it changes every 4 blocks. Picture this, the Wall Drive Bridge at dusk. Hundreds of thousands of bats pouring out from underneath it in one continuous ribbon, while the downtown skyline goes gold behind them. Traffic backed up on Memorial, somebody grilling in Buffalo Bayou Park. Warm, wet air, cicadas going, and a city so large that 4 completely different evenings are happening within a mile of you. Hit subscribe because next week we are doing the towns that look perfectly safe on paper and absolutely are not. And number 1 is where all of this started. The birthplace of Texas Oil, the town that made this state rich, now carrying one of the highest violent crime rates in America. On the 10th of January, 1901, a drilling crew south of Beaumont hit something a little over 1,000 feet down, and a column of oil came out of the ground higher than the derrick and kept coming for days. Spindletop. It produced more oil in a single day than every other well in America combined, and it created the modern petroleum industry more or less on the spot. Gulf oil started there. Texaco started there. The wealth of 20th century Texas, the skylines in Houston and Dallas, the endowments, the museums, the political dynasties, all of it traces back through a field outside this town. About 111,000 people live in Beaumont. In the most recent federal reporting year, it recorded 1,266 violent crimes, producing a rate of roughly 1,137 per 100,000. That is more than 3 times the national average, with 14 murders and a property crime rate above 3,300 per 100,000. That is roughly 1 in 88 odds of being a violent crime victim in a given year. To be precise about it, Houston edges this by about 11 points. Houston has 2.3 million people and a police department sized accordingly. This town has 111,000 and posts the same number. There is also real movement in the right direction, with the figure down about 17% from the prior year. And that deserves to be said as clearly as everything else. The place has bones. Lamar University sits here. The old downtown carries commercial architecture from the boom that would be a protected district in any city with money. There is a museum built inside the mansion of an oil family, the Gulf Coast wetlands are minutes away, and Cajun cooking crosses the Sabine River and improves everything it touches. And this is the whole arc of the video standing in one place. The oil did not stay. The industry born in that field built its headquarters somewhere else, its refineries where land ran cheapest, and its charitable foundations in cities with better airports. What stayed behind was the infrastructure, the environmental load, and the payroll of a company town after the company stopped needing the town. The tax base thinned. The police department has been understaffed for years, which is the point in this story where a city council begins making the same announcement annually, always under a new name. Always with a ribbon, always with a figure smaller than the shortfall it claims to address. 120 years ago, this ground produced more oil in one day than the rest of the country combined. Today, it produces a violent crime rate 3 times the national average and a calendar of ribbon cuttings. Picture this. Late August, 96 degrees at 8 in the evening, and no relief coming. You are standing in a field south of town where a granite marker names the date the world changed. There is nothing else out here. Cattle, a fence line, grass gone gold and brittle, cicadas so loud in the tree line they flatten into one continuous tone. This is the exact ground that produced more oil in a single day than the rest of America combined. And tonight it is quiet enough to hear the highway a mile off. Look east and the refineries are lit along the ship channel, every stack outlined in white against a sky gone copper, all of it owned by companies headquartered in other cities. The money left through that horizon, it never came back through this field. Here's what you will never hear from the people arguing about this state on television. Danger in Texas does not follow the border. It follows the exit of an industry. Every single place on this list was built by something that left. Timber, oil, rail, the mill, the plant, the company. The money went to a headquarters in another city, and the town kept the buildings, the roads, the pollution, and the bill. That is not a border story. It is an abandonment story, and it will not fit on a campaign sign, which is precisely why nobody tells it. Like this video because the algorithm does not push data-driven small-town reporting unless you tell it to. Subscribe because next week we are covering the towns that look completely safe on paper and are not. And share this with the friend who insists he can drive any road in this country because he cannot, and the locals already know which exits he needs to skip. Stay curious, stay skeptical, never let anybody else pick your map. And when the gas light comes on in a town you have never heard of, drive the extra 10 miles.